Okay, hello everyone. It's our great pleasure to welcome you all to this international webinar, Accelerating Carbon Dioxide Removal through Enhanced Mineralization, where we will share global best practices, pilot insights, and future potential. On behalf of the organizing team, including the CDR Mission Innovation, King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia, and also CSIRO in Australia, I thank you all for joining us today. We are honored to host such a diverse group of entrepreneurs, experts, and stakeholders from around the world, united in our commitment to accelerate meaningful climate action through enhanced carbon mineralization. So the main purpose of this webinar is to come together to exchange practical insight from operational pilots and testing facilities, also deepening our understanding of the potential, the opportunities, the limitation of enhanced mineralization technologies, and also most importantly, build connections across borders, sectors, and disciplines to move this field forward and faster. So why enhanced mineralization? As we all know, carbon dioxide removal is no longer optional. It's essential. Achieving net zero emission globally by mid-century requires both emission reduction and also permanent carbon removal at scale. Among the portfolio of carbon dioxide removal, we have the enhanced mineralization as it stands out as a promising pathway offering compelling advantages, including permanent storage, storing CO2 for thousands of years, also global scalability, leveraging abundant mineral resources through the continent, and industrial integration where it is compatible with existing industries such as the mining, the cement, and the steel sector, where we will hear from some of our presenters in today's webinar. So despite these advantages, enhanced mineralization remains significantly underdeployed, a gap we are here to discuss and support addressing. So we stand at a critical juncture where opportunity meets responsibilities. Pilot projects worldwide are validating technical visibility and demonstrating early successes. Breakthrough advances in material science, process engineering, and also field deployment are expanding possibilities. Support from initiatives like the Mission Innovation are catalyzing the momentum. But challenge remains technical, regulatory, financial, and social that need to be addressed, and this is what makes this webinar important. Next, please. So the agenda of our 2-hour webinar is as follows. We will begin with my colleague Abdullah Al-Yamani from the Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia, and also Renee from the CSIRO in Australia, who will provide an introduction about the CDR Mission Innovation and specifically the Enhanced Mineralization track. Following this foundation, we will hear from our distinguished speakers who will share their hands-on experience with Enhanced Mineralization project across in-situ, ex-situ, and enhanced weathering applications. Just housekeeping stuff before we start. After each presentation, our speaker will answer some of the questions live depending on the available time. For questions that we cannot accommodate live, we kindly ask our speakers to answer them on the chat. For the attendance, please submit your question on the Q&A window as we proceed. With that, I will hand it over to my colleague Rufaida Rimani. Rufaida, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, all. Can everyone hear me and see me clearly?
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, thank you all. We're gathered here today under the umbrella of Mission Innovation. We gathered so many organizations and countries to collaborate together under the Enhanced Mineralization track. Dr. Abdullah mentioned the criticality of this technology and this sector specifically for our time being here today. This is Rufaida Al-Yamani, MI CDR co-lead, and welcome everyone. So the scope of this mission is to enable CDR technologies to achieve a net reduction of 100 million tons of CO2 per year by 2030. So the mission aims for 3 short-term outcomes. The first outcome, which is enhanced understanding of local and global CDR potential. And I believe throughout our webinar here today, we are achieving this outcome, as well as the second outcome, which is the advancement of R&D for CDR technologies. And the third outcome, the global demonstration and pilot scale tests. I believe this webinar gathers a couple of these outcomes, and I really encourage everyone to take notes and be in full attendance for this important session. A bit of overview also on the mission. It was launched in COP26 in November 2021, and this is the coalition that started it. Basically, the co-leads are Canada, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And we have member countries for the MICDR mission, or Australia, the European Commission, Japan, Norway, India, and the United Kingdom, and some observer countries like Germany, Iceland, and Bahrain. And of course, the floor is always open for additional members to join us. The mission involves different tracks, again, and sprints, and I'll go over in details in the next few slides. So basically, it emphasizes on the long-term, secure CO2 storage and conversion into long-lived products. You see here that the technical tracks mentioned before under the CDR approaches are direct air capture, enhanced mineralization, biomass with carbon removal and storage, and LCA and TA. LCA stands for Life Cycle Analysis, and TA is Techno-Economic Assessment. Our focus here today is on the enhanced mineralization technical track, called by Saudi Arabia and Australia. I'd like to take a pause here and hand the floor over to my colleague, Renee. She is from Australia, and give a few welcome remarks. Renee, I think you can unmute. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rufida and Abdullah and the team in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I'd love to say a very quick welcome from Australia. We are very, very proud to be co-leading the enhanced mineralization track with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we have some very exciting plans for the year ahead, but I will let Rufida share those in a minute. In Australia, with the Department of Climate Change, we've been working on the development of a national CDR roadmap, which I'm really pleased to say is the first step in developing CDR policy in Australia. Anyway, I'm going to pass you back to Rufida, and we will see you all soon in the next, I guess, of the series of webinars upcoming this year, which we'll be in touch with very soon. But thank you so much, and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, Renee. Appreciate your words. So a bit on the technical part of natural mineralization process. It's a process that occurs naturally. And of course, if you are attending here today or presenting, you already know this. Throughout hundreds of years, some minerals inside the rocks react with the atmospheric CO2 to create carbonates. And by that, as a concept, CO2 is permanently removed and basically mineralized within the rock. So enhanced mineralization aims to expedite this process, bringing down this 100-year gap into something shorter than that, short term. So we have some technicalities here. I guess you can say that when it rains, CO2 mixes with water and create carbonic acid. Carbonic acid interacts with the rock minerals, which create carbonates, which is basically the solid minerals that secure and remove CO2. Another way to look at it is, for example, CO2-rich hydrothermal fluids plus underground rocks gives you carbonate-altered rocks. So it's just these two things combined, and then gives you the result of a carbonated rock in a natural process that takes over 100 years. And under the umbrella of enhanced mineralization, it aims to bring down this timeline from 100 years to a lot less. Also, another terminology we're looking at here is ex situ mineralization, ex situ referring to an above ground process, extracting rocks, reacting these rocks with the water and CO2 in a high pressure environment. And in situ mineralization refers to an underground process, also involving CO2 underground, for example, into depleted wells or basaltic rocks. So ex situ meaning above ground and in situ meaning underground. Let's take a step back. So the scope of enhanced mineralization track, again, we've explained before the first, second, and third outcome of this specific track. And for example, one of the activities that are happening under Mission Innovation, carbon dioxide removal mission, is the mapping initiative, the student prize competition, and some workshops like the ones we are doing here today. And also you can find on the CDR mission website a CDR launch map. This is regarding all the types of projects under the umbrella of CDR, not necessarily the enhanced mineralization track. So thank you all. It was a pleasure speaking with you all here today. And I leave the floor to my colleague Abdullah to present our first presenter for today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Vita, for giving us a clear glimpse of how mission innovation is working to accelerate clean energy solution, especially in the field of carbon dioxide removal and enhanced mineralization. So we will start with our speakers right now. So I will start with Howard. Howard will present the work of the AG6, a company that develops soil-based carbon removal technology and operates pilot project across multiple countries. Howard Bennett is the managing director at AG6, where the focus is on carbon sequestration through integrating agriculture and mining. He has spoken at national forums such as the Climate Smart Engineering Conference and the CSIRO's Carbon Symposium, highlighting innovative strategies to enhance Australia's carbon capture efforts. Howard, the mic is yours. We can't hear you, Howard.
That was an inconspicuous start. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for the kind introduction and for pulling this together. Good morning, evening, afternoon to everyone. And thank you to Mission Innovation and our co-leads Australia and Saudi Arabia for the invitation to speak. I'm here representing AGSEC, a pioneer in the enhanced weathering space. And we're implementing what we think is a promising, scalable and permanent solution to carbon dioxide removal. Today I wanted to walk you through the carbon dioxide removal or the carbon removal problem we face, AGSEC's enhanced weathering approach, and some key outcomes from pilot projects we've been executing over the last couple of years, and then hopefully present a pathway through to scale. Here we go. So, fundamentally, we need to remove about 60 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide removal, and there's a multitude of pathways. Obviously, the decarbonisation of the grid, the cleaning up of industry, the food problems. Sorry, I'll take that. Protecting nature and then electrifying the grid are all very suitable pathways, but there's still going to be what we believe is about 10 billion tonnes of CO2 per year that needs to be removed fundamentally from the hard to abate. They're just impossible to decarbonise. What that means then from a sort of scale of opportunity is we're seeing very solidly that the CO2 growth, specifically in developed countries, has fallen. Although there, as a global contribution, it's still continuing to rise, and we've got to work really hard then to make those reductions. And effectively, the graph on the right is showing the variety of pathways to ensure that temperatures, the CO2 reductions needed to keep temperatures below 2 degrees C. So within carbon dioxide removal, there's effectively a lack of nature positive permanent solutions. Lots of very positive starts have been made, but unfortunately there's the cost associated with doing permanent carbon dioxide removal is not currently reflected in the prices of the quality of the credits. What this is meaning is that there's an opportunity for nature positive permanent solutions that obviously are working into a lack of supply of quality credits. There are difficult to decarbonise existing businesses. Permanent carbon capture is not easy. Australia is obviously a net exporter of emissions, and with all of the projects currently underway, there's competition for arable land. So for us, carbon dioxide removals are vital, and this is what net zero means for us. That means we've got to increase the proportion of offsets that come from carbon removals rather than just focusing on emission reductions. There is a market signal to increase supply. Only permanent sequestration genuinely stores the carbon. There is rewarding permanence for long-lived offsets, and the voluntary markets are starting to recognise permanence as a differentiator, and we're seeing that in price. Directly support the development of net zero aligned offsetting. If we can work it with in-situ processes as well as purely in-setting processes, as well as producing carbon markets, that they're seeing a better uptake from the end customer, and then you can value add the product of the carbon removal as well. So, as Rafuda briefly touched on, we're an ex situ mineral carbonisation project. Effectively, we're working with current byproducts from quarrying and mining operations to take the rocks that they've already created into a dust, a crusher dust of sorts that doesn't have a natural use, and where it's sufficiently has a sufficiently high magnesium calcium content, we can use that to form magnesium calcium carbonate, which locks up the carbon dioxide for geological timescales, so hundreds of thousands of years. Obviously, the process is entirely natural. We believe it's scalable, and it's obviously dependent on how effectively we can spread the material over arable land. We're working very closely with farmers, and this is where we spent the last couple of years working with agronomic partners, as well as farmers, to work through, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but work through exactly how to apply the basalt, both from a use of equipment and the operational challenges, as well as the how they substitute basalt and the natural effect that it has in lifting the pH of the soil, to use it as a lime replacement, where they might be having very high lime applications, and obviously that's a very costly process for them as well. So if we can define the co-benefits to both improve the soil and water health, as well as get some crop yield benefits, then there's benefits all around. And then finally, the social co-benefits. So the goal being that this can drive investment into the rural communities as well. So benefits to the soil health. So this is a map of Australia where all soil enhancers are applied in the hundreds of thousands of tonnes. This is from 2016 to 17. And effectively you're seeing the very high application rates, obviously all through the arable and intensively farmed areas of Australia. What we know about enhanced weathering studies that have been done both in Australia and around the world is that you do see an increase in microbial activity, and this is effectively positive for crop yield. That increase in microbial activity has a flow-on effect to the increase in the nutrient use efficiency. Again, giving plants the ability to efficiently use nutrients means less fertilizer required. Ultimately, it drives improved soil health, which in turn helps it to retain water and manages the pH more effectively. And then soil conditions are commonly used, like lime. If we can substitute that for carbon dioxide, for effectively basalt, silicate material that we can use that has the same effect as what the farmers chasing to lift the soil pH, but also removes carbon dioxide. It's a win-win. So we've executed 2 projects at an application rate. One in Alkhedhair, which is about an hour north of Sydney. These were both done in 2023. This was a application of about 650 tonnes on about 15 hectares. That's pasture that's currently in. The land was currently being unutilised. It was lying fallow used as a buffer zone. We generated about 160 tonnes of CO2e removal in that case, and you can see the tractor and the spreader effectively going up and down the field to execute that one. The second project we executed later in 2023 was in Bundaberg. This was done on about 1,000 tonne application on 50 hectares of land. It was done under the Euro methodology. This was a sugarcane and legume application, and we had another 50 hectares cordoned off the side to run as a controlled split field trial. This sequestered about 250 tonnes of CO2e. There was no yield difference in year one, which again is a positive thing, and broadly in line with what we expected, and ultimately we're going for from a sugarcane from the two fields. We're expecting the next harvest will come off in about August, September, depending on timing. And we're expecting a slight increase in the yield on the field that's been applied with the basalt. And if that's obviously is a function of how the basalt breaks down in the soil. The third trial that we've got underway is a small plot trial down in Young. That's got a varying application rates of control of 0, 10, 20, and then a 50-ton application, per hectare technically. Again, what we're looking for is to basically try and pull the signal out for both the carbon dioxide removal and show how it, in a open system, we're able to record in our measurement systems for calculating the amount of carbon dioxide removed is abundantly clear and valid from a scientific basis, as well as from an agronomic basis, what the correct calculation is for the replacement or application of the various lime to basalt ratios would be. This is not our small plot trial, but that's another one from one of our partner organisations that was executing the small plot trials in pasture. And again, you can kind of see how they're managing the various growth of the grasses in each of those. For us, the next key step is working through the regulatory timelines. So CSIRO and Co are out there with the methodologies, but we're still waiting to see full-blown acceptance of the credits bought commercially over those platforms. The weathering timelines. So again, depending on the quality of the mineral, we know it will all weather eventually. It's how much is saleable. And then the MRV piece, so the measurement, reporting, and verification, is obviously very complicated in an open system for exactly how much carbon dioxide's been removed. But the acceptance of the testing and scientific work that builds the rigor and transparency and credibility of the enhanced weathering process is the key thing that we're working through with various partner organisations like CSIRO to sort out.
Thank you very much, Harold. Your technology actually offers a vital dual benefit, as you mentioned, replacing the conventional maybe soil enhancer while contributing to the carbon removal, which simultaneously solve two critical farming challenge. So maybe you touched on some of the question, which is how does the AGSIC measure and verify the permanent removal of CO2 and the improvement in soil quality from its operation?
So we have macro horizons installed, so you can't quite see them in this photo, but effectively in each of those small plot trials, we have macro horizons at 10 and 30 centimetres below soil, and that's grabbing soil pore water. Effectively, as the transmission pathway of the carbon dioxide into a carbonate occurs, we're able to collect the soil pore water and physically see it. We then match that up against our models for how we expected the basalt to weather and effectively plot the two lines, and that shows over time how much weathering is occurring and how much carbon dioxide is being removed.
So I got another question. It's about also regarding MRV. So someone is asking, what about monitoring the site? Can you elaborate on that, please?
When they say monitoring, so we've effectively, it's sort of a blessing and a curse from Australia, because the transmission pathway occurs via the rainfall, and the rainfall generally occurs in patchy, might be the polite way of describing it, conditions. We can basically we know effectively from rainfall what the timeline is to transmission down for the 10 and 30 centimetre macro rods, and we can grab the soil pore water on a case by case basis. So the trial that we've got running down in Young is we've got a third-party agronomist that we've contracted out to grab those samples and get that information. Basically every rainfall, not quite every, but sort of it'll rain for a week, so they'll grab the samples through that period, and then it won't rain for a little while again. So yeah, that's how we collect our data.
Okay, thank you very much, Harold. So now we will move to our second speaker, Sophia from MCI Carbon. MCI Carbon, a company advancing ex situ mineralization and pioneering innovative processes to accelerate mineral carbonation. Sophia Hamblin-Wang is the co-founder and the COO of MCI Carbon, an Australian technology company transforming CO2 emission into building materials for the circular economy. World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. Sophia co-founded the CO2 Value Australian and serves on the Australian Capital Territory Climate Change Council. Her work has been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, and the Australian Financial Review. Also, Sophia has represented Australia at the 2020 and the 2023 World Economic Forum annual meetings and the UN Youth Climate Summit. Sophia, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for having MCI Carbon at this very important meeting. MCI were founded in 2013 before carbon dioxide removal was even a term. So it's really exciting now to see the field expanding and growth accelerating, and we're really proud to support as many different technologies and solutions that can be scaled in this sector. So at MCI Carbon, we see CO2 as a valuable resource. This wouldn't be a new concept to anybody on this call, but we do talk about how we accelerate the Earth's natural process of weathering, but then we capture and really specialize in making minerals absorb CO2 very well, and then making that absorbing mineral then very useful for advanced manufacturing and the built environment. So it's all about fixing the CO2 and then using it in the built environment or in everyday life, really about a business model. So what do we do at MCI Carbon? Well, we basically, you've heard a lot about what weathering is, but in an industrial setting, we are able to create magnesium carbonate, calcium carbonate, and amorphous silica very quickly in a matter of minutes or hours, so quite quickly. And then we work with large product manufacturers on ensuring that those products are extra useful for markets. We also, over the last 13 years, have been really focused on our life cycle assessments and our techno-economic assessments in order to ensure that our technology approach is having climate benefits. So really ensuring that from mining or taking industrial wastes all the way through to the logistics and transportation of the downstream products, that we are measuring the CO2 footprint of our products so that we're having an overall net climate benefit for what we do. And we have had quite a lot of success recently in working with downstream customers on what our products can do. So we have a pilot plant that has been running since 2016 in Newcastle in Australia. That is a rapid validator. It's a TRL6 plant that we have used to validate 36 different feedstocks, including mine tailings, various ultramafic rocks, including serpentinite, but also many other ultramafic rocks as well. Industrial wastes like steel slags, incinerator bottom ash, and other different wastes that contain magnesium or calcium, and working with our customers on then also simulating their different flue gas, the different flue gases that are available at their industrial sites, and creating assessment models for them. So we have this pilot plant in Newcastle that our customers can work with us on quickly validating if there may be a business case. And then we would then move on to scaling up the work. So this is what we've been focusing on for the last 10 years, working on the technology and the fixing of the CO2 in particular into the minerals. And then we have received more than $30 million from our Australian government in order to co-contribute to the building of a flagship demonstration plant for carbon capture and utilization. And where that fits in with carbon dioxide removal is that this is really focusing on the permanent storage of the CO2. And we can absolutely be working with direct air capture technologies within our pilot plant, our demonstration plant. So this is our Myrtle facility right now. We are actually just about to finish our commissioning phase. This facility will lock away between 1,000 and 3,000 tonnes of CO2 per annum, and create around 10,000 tonnes of low carbon embodied materials for large pilot trials with large industrial customers of downstream products. At the moment, this Myrtle facility, it takes all of its CO2 from Orica, which is just next door there. They give us between 1,000 and 3,000 tonnes of CO2 from their ammonia plant. But like I said, this is it's designed in a way that can be testing multiple different feedstocks, multiple different CO2 sources, and creating a multitude of different downstream products. And we kind of describe it like a Swiss Army knife of mineral carbonation, based right here in Australia. And we work with international customers on bringing the feedstocks and the simulation of their gases in Australia. But then the next scale up of the plant would be built on site next door to whoever wants to build a plant. So very exciting, because we were commissioning in March this year, and we're at the final stages of that. So anyone who's worked in industrial builds, that it's very, very exciting. We then begin our first campaign with RHI Magnesita in the next couple of months. And that is the world's largest refractories maker, and that is our first customer. They will be sending serpentinite from Austria. We will be simulating their industrial settings in this Myrtle campaign, and we will be creating magnesium carbonate and silica, which will then be sent back to Austria for large-scale testing in their own refractory making process, as well as other uses for the silica in local markets. So we are simulating with that customer a virtuous loop of collecting their CO2 from their industrial setting and putting it back into the input product to create refractory bricks. I thought I'll just go over quickly a mass energy balance summary so that people can ask more pointed questions, but I won't spend too much time on this. But just to say that over the last 13 years, we've been tuning and tailoring what we do and how well we do it. And now we can be quite confident that MCI can take around 3 to 4 tons of material and capture around 85 to 90% of CO2 with those rocks. We can take direct flue gas, so long as the flue gas concentration is around 15% and above. And we can also capture NOx and SOx. So we've been validating that in our testing. And then from our measurements, we're able to show that we have a CO2 avoided factor of 2 to 3. So we're really getting into very high abatement territory. The important thing to note here is that MCI carbon, we can take direct flue gas from the stack. So if you're comparing our technology to others, these numbers are a capture and transformation in one step. So if you're comparing us, that's important to note. As I mentioned, we have our first customer locked in, and they are looking to build the first commercial plant in Austria, and that will be 50 to 100,000 tons, and it will be built by 2028 to 2029, and we are already working on the pre-engineering for that. So it's exciting to be, I would say, accelerating towards our first commercially viable plant. We've been focusing on hard-to-abate industries. That's been really important to MCI's DNA. The addressable market is large. I don't need to go into this too much because it's been already covered. But we do see the emergence of quite a lot of traders and low emissions and negative emissions products interest now in the market end, and I'd be happy to talk more about that. We've raised more than $50 million recently, and we're have basically reaching critical mass of getting a lot of interest in our technology, and we're looking to really accelerate towards getting to commercial scale. We secured investment from Mitsubishi Ube Cement this year, which joins Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank, Mizuho Bank, and Itochu as 4 Japanese giants that have all invested in us. And that really adds to our focus on Europe and Japan, among other very important regions. So if that interests you, please do reach out. I'm always happy to have a discussion. And then finally, we just talk about that we need a solution for the world that is natural. We talked about already how weathering is natural. That's scalable to the gigatons. Harold already covered that. Permanent, yes, that's been covered as well, but also profitable. The downstream products that MCI Carbon is producing, we see that covering 90% of the business model. So carbon credits only are, a cherry on top to what we're doing. We're trying to create a business model that doesn't rely on a mechanism or a methodology in order to get to market. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Sophia, for this formative presentation and for the comprehensive overview of MCI Carbon progress from the pilot phase to your 2028 target for the commercial phase. We wish you luck on this one. Your 13 years experience actually offer invaluable lessons of the viability and the economic of the enhanced mineralization. So the first question, maybe touching on, you mentioned the carbon credit, which is just a cherry on the top. So I've got a question: how does your mineral carbonation process economic works? So if you are saying, well, we don't focus on the carbon credit mainly, so what's the revenue split between the selling of these low carbon materials, and how does this model impact the project viability?
Yeah, so we see around 10% is different mechanism credits, and then 50% for the magnesium carbonate or calcium carbonate, and 50% for the silica products. And we see quite a large variety of prices in our business model, and it's highly dependent on what the feedstock is and what the local market conditions are. So it's completely variable according to different locations. But we do find that investors and customers require us to not be too reliant on carbon mechanisms in order to have confidence to make a final investment decision because of global uncertainty. So I think if we were overly reliant on carbon credits, we wouldn't still be around 13 years down the track. It would have been very hard to survive so far.
Okay. I have another question regarding maybe the piloting or the moving to a larger scale plant. So what challenge did you face in scaling mineral carburation from lab to industrial pilot, and how were they addressed and overcome?
So our core team of 10 scaled from lab into pilot and built our pilot plant in 2016. And we made a range of lessons in that. And that core team has then formed the basis of the engineering team to scale from pilot into demonstration. The demonstration plant is, it's a $30 million facility. It is unbelievably complex, and it has taken longer and cost more than we originally expected. And I would say the commissioning phase has gone extremely well, but that is because our engineering team have an extremely hazard-based approach to scaling up engineering with the support of Orica. So we've used our investors and our partners who have deep expertise in running industrial facilities at full scale in order to help us to do that. So we haven't done it all by ourselves. I think that would be crazy. But we have, in every case that we can, have borrowed from unit operations that have already been demonstrated at scale. And then only 2 of our 7 unit operations are bespoke. And that has been really important to minimize the amount of risk that we're taking on when scaling up. And that is the same approach that we will take in the next scale up too.
Okay, good luck. Thank you very much, Sophia.
Thank you very much for listening.
So now we will move to our next speaker, Andrew from the Carbon Coat. Andrew will discuss the Carbon Coat's work in enhanced weathering using engineered soil, a solution that targets both carbon removal and food security. Andrew is a co-founder and CEO of the Carbon Coat, an Australian company pioneering enhanced rock weathering to decarbonize agriculture. Under his leadership, Carbon Coat has been recognized by the Musk Foundation as one of the top global carbon removal firms in both 2022 and 2024. The company operates across 18 sites in Australia and the US, with over 15 years focus on building a profitable operational system spanning financial services, heavy industry, and agriculture. Andrew has a proven track record in operational innovation. He has led operation research team at one of the world's largest mining company, implementing machine learning for assist monitoring, which significantly improved predictive maintenance and equipment uptime. The mic is yours, Andrew.
Thank you, Abdullah. Hello, everyone. As Abdullah mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of a company called Carbonor, based in Australia, in Brisbane. We are a group of former colleagues at a large mining company that used to build ML systems for large open cut mining operations. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how you move rock from A to B profitably. We were also augmented by a team of professors across soil chemistry and geochemistry. And tonight, I would like to run you through how we're viewing the technology called enhanced rock weathering, and basically share with you two big insights that we've experienced as we've moved from pure R&D into pilot and now early commercialization phase, and give you an insight into what we think is really critical in terms of scaling this technology. So we're really focused on utilising enhanced rock weathering to basically build the resilience of intensive agriculture. So think of areas that require either a lot of fertiliser or irrigation, etc., where the majority of the food is produced. And we believe enhanced rock weathering should be viewed, a bit like Sophia mentioned, it should not just be viewed through the carbon credit lens. We're doing a thing for carbon credits. It's critically important, but we think ERW especially has this fertiliser superpower that allows it to really drive a positive story around, hey, we're just doing it, we're just going to do farming better, with lower input costs, less volatile input costs, more stable growing systems, decentralized fertilizer capabilities. And then over the top of that, we have the CO2 lens, which basically, in the way we're viewing it at the moment, is a once in a generation opportunity to forge new trading partners. And as the world and tariffs sort of really start to kick off and the old globalized world goes away, the emissions story wraps around a food resilience story. And right at the core of that is this technology called enhanced rock weathering, which is really just a way of summarizing a set of chemical reactions that explain how nature forms soils anyway. So as we move into early commercialization, we have reached our thesis and been backed up on our thesis around ERW's role as a low emission resilient agricultural input by now having operations all through the intensive zone on the East Coast. So that red area on that map, with thanks to Climate Work Centre, that red area is really describing Australia's intensive zone. So the rest of Australia where it's white is not really where we can operate due to no rock, no rainfall, etc. But as you can see, we've now expanded our footprint into most of Australia's major agricultural verticals, especially in exports, across both horticulture, sugar, grains, livestock, and crucially rice. We got our start by proving that some chemical reactions that people thought took 10,000 years to happen actually have a half-life of 3 to 5 years, especially specifically the CO2 removal chemical reactions. And that's kind of how we got our start as a company. And we've really been focused on forging strong partnerships with very commercial but agricultural focused institutions. So we're working with UC Davis over in California on a couple of pilot sites in the Central Valley. We've just received a federal grant from the federal government down here in Australia for $5 million as part of a climate smart agriculture grant, which specifically wasn't just an R&D grant. It has to have a commercial angle to it. So how do we get farmers earning more per hectare? We've been recognised by the Brisbane Lord Mayor's Office as one of the most innovative for product innovation here in Queensland, and we've just received a Cascade Climate ERW partnership grant. So we really think that specifically for ERW, but I'd be shocked if the other speakers didn't agree with this somewhat, is that with all of these technologies, we believe there's 3 critical layers. And almost in importance, it's a commercial layer, which will drive a science layer, which in turn will drive an operations layer. Now, it's important to note that there is just as much innovation happening in the commercial layer with a lot of these technologies as there is in the other layers. However, tonight's not about that. Tonight is about what's happening in the field for those thinking or policymakers or practitioners in different locations. If we were having a coffee and you were asking our opinion on actual technical operations. So before we get into that, and just to ground everyone in a common sense of what's going on, the process of enhanced weathering involves partnering with a large-scale quarry with strong systems to not only source and screen appropriate rock for heavy metals and other rock properties, which we'll get into in a second, but also liaising with that quarry around their operations, but also with the farming operation, so you can fit in with their natural cycles throughout the year of harvesting. For not just rock delivery, but also doing all the infrastructure installation that you need to do before you even put the rock down. So soil baselining is a critical one, both at depth and shallow, and then installing lysimeters, so underground rain gauges essentially to capture that bicarbonate, and fitting in around existing operations with existing equipment is also another big thing that we do. So we install that equipment, and then we also orchestrate the loading and spreading, and all the while using computers to track both the dollar cost and the emission cost of those operations. So when we get into actual operations, the first thing that we have found is just really critical to get right is the type of rock you're using. And people we're working with, researchers we're working with, have published a paper recently that basically boils down to that there was a conception that you need to grind this rock really fine to increase the surface area. And the reality is actually no. What actually matters is the crystalline structure inside that rock, not the rock particle size itself. So the big three things to come out of this paper by our colleagues is that we've confirmed that weathering follows a predictable mineral sequence, so dissolution from glass to olivine, followed by the slower reacting pyroxene and plagioclase, which not only aligns with sort of thermodynamic expectations, but also confirms that not all basalt contributors contribute equally. The second thing is the rock structure, not the rock size, determines the effectiveness. So what we're really looking for there is internal fracture networks, interconnected glass networks, microporosity, because what's really important is how pervasive can the water be once that volcanic rock glass goes to actually break down that rock from the inside out. And for all that's quality and context are critical. So we've seen in some of our sites that have been doing it for 25 years, in a few of those years, they put down what they thought was a basalt, but was actually a schist or something, and absolutely nothing is weathered. Now, they're the big outtakes, and that we've been able to prove that with sort of high-powered cameras, and I recommend reading the paper. It's really interesting. But what does that mean on field? So what that means on field is that we're getting pretty dramatic pH shifts and cation exchange capacity and EC shifts inside 1 year. At the 0 to 5 centimetre horizon, and inside 2 years in the 10 centimetre horizon. So before you run a full-scale carbon project to get verified carbon removal, the game kind of is, how can you effectively proxy those chemical reactions at a low cost, at a decent enough scale? And these kind of factors, or these kinds of results, help you do that. But another sort of implication of being able to use larger grain size is that when it comes to scale deployment in a community, so these are particle matter, so monitoring dust in the air at up to 2.5 and 10 kilometres away from the actual site. When it comes to scale deployment and getting stakeholder engagement with both government and the local population, you need to be able to prove that there's not dust particles in the air. And that's another critical benefit, I guess, of being more comfortable using a larger grain size. So that's sort of the rock, I guess, a scientific angle on on ERW operations that had some operational implications. And now we're going to talk about operational implications that have scientific effect. So the theme of this next section is very much about building internal capacity across operations. And to give you a sense of the kind of data feeds that you have to be able to pull in efficiently, these are just some of the elements that you need to be able to have in-house to be able to rapidly assess whether a site will be suitable or not for operations. And why that matters is that these three plots here are an example of our system going to work. And on the leftmost graph, you have the theoretically all the available basalt in Queensland and all the theoretically available land use. And then you sort of come down a level of resolution and a bunch of those basalt sources and those land elements drop away, whether it's soil pH, soil type, water catchment area. But then when you start really drilling down into the fine details, you see just how prevalent and actually appropriate site. So that pink bit is the only appropriate site to do heavy monitoring for a project, given all the other sites around it. Now, that's really important because if you're going to go be spending money on trying to push the boundaries or clear up uncertainties around the science, or indeed if you're going to get down to ground level. So, for example, this is two big issues we've come across, even when you've been able to isolate those sites. When you get on site and you start doing soil testing and EM surveys and all that other fun stuff, if you've got something like salination happening, so you've got a water table that really fluctuates up and down and will flood your underground rain gauge, you need an internal capability to build your own lysimeters at custom depths rapidly and cost effectively. And doing all of this seems like a lot of hard work, but it's worth it because when it comes to, we're going to be spending about $250,000 installing these flumes on highly vetted, appropriate sites. And those flumes, the reason we've been given the money to invest in installing these bits of equipment is that we're able to actually isolate the sites that work best and have a strong track record of being able to do that. And these flumes are so important because currently where ERW is sitting, where the uncertainties lie is, okay, we've got these theoretical chemical reactions that happen. We theoretically know what should happen in carbon removal, in cation exchange capacity, etc. But specifically for the carbon removal, trapping bicarbonate in solution is like the name of the game at the moment. And we're about to deploy I think it's the most dense experiment in the world at the moment to trap bicarbonate with the installation of these. And just, it's the sort of end result of toiling away and making all the mistakes and building the internal capability to be able to understand where that stuff, where this equipment should go. And if everything goes well, we should be able to push the science even further, increase the confidence in the market, and ultimately provide those commercial signals to allow this technology to scale. So that was a really, really rapid rundown of who we are and sort of two big buckets of observations from our company as we move into commercialization phase.
Thank you, Andrew, for this insightful presentation and for sharing the Carbon Code's innovative approach and also the practical field experience. In fact, your work helped us better understand both the scalability and permanence of enhanced weathering solution, given that you are operating at different locations. So I've got a question, maybe it was asked with the enhanced weathering application to Harold, is that how do you quantify and verify the permanence of the carbon storage in your sites and engineered soils?
Yeah, so there's sort of two things I think to consider with measuring and validating this stuff. So you've got several verification bodies of varying quality that are essentially give you the requirements that you need to have, everything from soil baselining all the way through to actual end verification, including technology stacks. So the what that you need to be doing is covered off by those independent verification bodies. You need to have arguably like a good idea of what you're doing anyway. You can't just follow a recipe, otherwise you're going to come unstuck. And preferably you want to be operating about 18 months to 2 years ahead of where the market is. But in terms of in-field measurements, it's basically coming down to a whole bunch of sensors to understand what's happening in that soil column, both from everything from pH to cation exchange capacity, soil sensors, soil temperature sensors, soil moisture sensors, weather gauges happening above, transport models for how water's flowing through, catchment models for what it links up to. The more granular you can get on that soil profile, the better things will be. But when it comes to actually how you measure this stuff, if you're starting from scratch, you can just look up the enhanced weathering methodologies of any of the big verification bodies, and they'll be telling you what needs to be delivered into them. And so to get that, you're looking at mainly lysimeters and either river monitoring and other sort of soil monitoring capabilities, but also a lot of baselining and a lot of stuff being sent off to labs for testing.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question, which is specifically maybe for Australia and some of the dry and windy regions. So the question is, what's being done to assess and mitigate potential health risk from dust and particulate matter in large-scale enhanced rock weathering application, especially in dry and windy regions of Australia?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we have from our mining days always had a big focus on understanding, which is why you do this expensive consultant work, having monitors set 10 kilometres away from operations. So the short answer is what's being done. I mean, internally, how we deal with it is we don't tend to work with rock that presents any sort of risk. So by dealing with a mafic material, we are basically removing in its entirety any asbestosis risk or any crystalline silica risk. So removing the actual bad stuff, if there was dust, is step one. Step two is really back to that sort of rock particle size. So we potentially work with several quarries that have sub 70 micron dust that looks like talcum powder. We tend to avoid working with that just because of its ability to blow away. And that's again why these sort of large particle sizes are so critical, is that we've been able to demonstrate that that stuff doesn't blow away. But I guess a sort of thing we've learned is that always be on the front foot, always be ahead of operations. So before you do anything, you're engaging with the local government, you're engaging with local stakeholders 6 months up to a year before you do anything to get everyone comfortable with what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We've got more questions, but if you kindly answer them on the Q&A window. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. So now we will move to another carbon sequestration or enhanced mineralization approach, which is in-situ mineralization. We've got two speakers. We will start with Suleiman from 44.01. Suleiman will be talking about their company, 44.01, where their approach focuses on permanently storing CO2 into peridotite rock formations found in scalable quantities across their region. Suleiman Al-Mani is the injection system lead at 44.01, where he works at the intersection of engineering and innovation to scale in situ CO2 mineralization. With a background in chemical, materials, and reservoir engineering, Suleiman has delivered first-of-a-kind projects, from deploying CO2 mineralization injection systems to piloting geological hydrogen and DAC technologies. He played a central role in designing and executing the world's first in-situ mineralization pilot in peridotite, and continues to develop novel injection strategies and technologies that reduce the cost and complexity of CO2 sequestration. Suleiman, the mic is yours.
Yeah, I'm muted. Thank you, Abdullah, for the kind introduction and for the invite to represent 4401 in this webinar. I will share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, but it's not on the full screen mode.
Yeah, I can't seem to make it go in full screen. Let me perhaps stop sharing and sharing it again. If it's readable, Abdullah, I think yeah, I think there's a glitch in the system.
Yeah, it's readable. Yeah, you could present it this way.
Awesome. Thanks again, Abdullah. So I'll first start off with who we are as 44.01. We are a technology development company. We started working in Oman, and what we focus on is developing a sequestration technology. We are part of the CCUS value chain, and it's focused on the very last step of CCUS, which is sequestration. So there are conventionally a lot of carbon capture technologies available in the market, ranging from different types of point source capture to different types of direct air capture. And a lot of these various technologies aim or focus on optimizing carbon capture for different concentrations of CO2, that being in different point sources or even from directly from the air. But in general, carbon capture is quite difficult. And once that CO2 is captured, it needs a means for it to be sequestered and removed. And that happens conventionally through CO2 storage technologies, which is conventional storage, like storing it in depleted oil and gas wells or storing it in saline aquifers. What we develop at 4401 is basically another option, which is in situ mineralization. That it gives us optionality when it comes to storage options. We're not basically limited to a single technology for sequestering CO2, and we have more options that unlock more geographies and more options for carbon capture to minimize the overall cost of CCUS. So I'll start with the name 44.01. That's one thing I get the most questions about, and it's the molecular mass of CO2. So CO2 is one carbon and two oxygens. Carbon has a molecular mass of 12 and two oxygens 16s. You sum that and it's 44.01. And that's the core focus of the company and the technology we're developing. We're focused on eliminating CO2. So what we work within is basically the last step of CCUS, even though we collaborate quite frequently with industrial emitters, biogenic sources of CO2 and direct air capture. But the technology is primarily focused on sequestration in mafic and ultramafic rocks. So CCS is when CO2 is emitted from industrial sources, and it's called CDR if it's from biogenic sources or from DAC. The CO2 itself is originated from air. For us, it's the same. It's just the same molecule. We receive it, and then it becomes our job to basically eliminate it. And the way we eliminate it is different. We employ in situ mineralization, and basically what the previous presenters showcased that has been done on surface, we do it in the subsurface. And the end product is generation of carbon credits or allowances for the emitters. So just to take one step back on why do we do all of this. So if we look into the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere over the past thousands of years, there is some reasonable fluctuations from high concentration to low concentration. And that matches basically Earth going from ice age to hot periods. And that is also linked to the way the planet rotates around the sun. And that's more fluctuations in temperatures leading to ice to melt and releasing CO2 in the atmosphere and vice versa. But what happened since the Industrial Revolution is us tapping into a dense source of carbon, which is part of the carbon cycle originally, but it's not been extracted quite rapidly into the atmosphere, and for access to low-cost energy, and that low-cost energy benefited humanity quite massively. But we did not really internalize the environmental aspects of accessing that energy. So if we think of an analogy of a bathtub, where we need to maintain the water level within a certain height, so that the bathtub basically does not overflow. What we managed to do is basically add more water, but we did not at the same time start removing more water from the bathtub. So we're gradually approaching a higher and higher water level, and then eventually that will overflow, which we're trying to prevent. And that's where CDR is necessary, where we're actively removing water from this bathtub analogy, or we can basically start stopping CO2 from being emitted into the atmosphere in the first place. And that's when it comes to global agreements. We are committed to a maximum temperature rise, or targeting a maximum temperature rise of 1.5 degrees C and not exceeding 2 degrees C. And if we see climate models and projections, we can see the business as usual case where we basically miss this target. So, and most of the models show that in order for us to maintain the temperature is within 2 degrees C, there has to be a lot of emission avoidance. And that's basically switching to renewables, focusing on energy efficiency. But there will always be some residual emissions that are necessary. We need for industries that cannot really or are highly reliant on oil and gas. So those emissions then need to be basically captured and sequestered, which is a reverse of the process that, if we're thinking about it from a carbon cycle perspective, we're reversing what we're doing. We're emitting, or we're tapping into the breakage of the carbon-hydrogen bonds, and then those CO2 molecules need to be sent back underground, so we maintain the carbon concentration in the atmosphere. And that gets us to a maximum of basically net zero. But even climate models show that in order for us to stay within 2 degrees C, we will need net negative emissions. And that's when CDRs become quite necessary. And that's removing CO2 or historic CO2. So these are pictures from Oman, and we are quite blessed here, because the Samail alpheolite is the biggest alpheolite in the world, and it runs throughout the Hajar mountain range. And what it is basically it's an up-thrusted piece of the oceanic crust, and we say that it's in disequilibrium with the atmosphere because it wants to react actively with the CO2 in the atmosphere. So if you take a walk in the many wadis we have here in Oman, you can see wherever water flows, there is precipitation of calcium carbonates and magnesium carbonates. And that's just a natural process that takes place. The very minute amount of CO2 that is trapped in rainwater actually mineralizes over time. So this is an active sink of CO2. It's part of the carbon cycle. And what we aim to do is basically mimic this natural process, but do it where CO2 is not naturally exposed, and that's in the subsurface. So I give an example of peridotite, which is an ultramafic rock, but this can be extended to mafic rocks as well. In the end, what we're really targeting is calcium and magnesium ions. Those ions bind eventually with carbonates, and then they precipitate as serpentine and calcite. And the process has been explained previously, but it's the rock itself, which is olivine and pyroxene, is alkaline in nature. When we dissolve CO2 into water, we create carbonic acid, which is acidic, and then it's a simple acid-base reaction to neutralize the mixture. So another question that I often get asked is that why do we dissolve CO2 in water? So there is one reason that it's a feedstock that is required for the reaction, but that's for a certain stoichiometric ratio. But we require much more water just to completely dissolve CO2, and we still do that because of certain reasons. So if we see the figure on the left-hand side here, that's how CO2 is conventionally trapped in, say, saline aquifers or depleted oil and gas wells. And what is done there is that there is a structural trap where an impermeable rock layer overlaying a reservoir of porous and permeable rock. And we inject CO2, and that CO2 displaces the pre-existing fluid. And the pre-existing fluid tends to be, or normally is just saline water. And saline water is higher density in comparison to CO2 gas, even under pressure. And that density difference creates a buoyant force. And we know from Archimedes, it's the same method as we see boats float. If there is a density difference and a volume displaced, then basically that gives an upward force. And that's why gas would want, or gas or supercritical, depends on the depth, would want to flow upwards, which, that means it will leak off. And that necessitates a capped layer, so and which is a requirement for conventional storage. So the majority of CO2 initially, when injected in, say, a saline aquifer, is just stored within a cap rock. And over time, we rely more on residual trapping mechanisms. And that's due to just surface tensions within pore space. And slowly, but some of the CO2 will start dissolving in the pre-existing brine. And then over thousands of years, some of that CO2 mineralizes. And if we look on the other hand, when it comes to mineralization, if we are uncertain about presence of a cap rock, we need to basically eliminate the presence of buoyancy. And that's why we primarily aim to fully dissolve CO2 in water. So by eliminating buoyancy, we basically are able to inject into a fractured reservoir where we cannot guarantee the presence of a cap rock. And then this mixture is also quite acidic. And the acidity of this mixture, when it flows through the fractured reservoir, it leaches out calcium and magnesium minerals. So we have a zone where we're actually removing minerals or dissolving those reactant minerals from the rock. And within the distant horizon, it starts binding with carbonates, and eventually it saturates within the liquid phase. And once it's supersaturated, it starts precipitating into new rock form. And that's what we call minerals trapping. So this is a simple schematic of how sites are typically set up. We need a source of sustainable water, a CO2 source, and a sustainable energy source. Sustainable energy is quite important because to maintain the life cycle assessment for the project, we do not want to basically rely on sources where we end up emitting more CO2 than sequestering. And that's particularly important if we're hosting direct air capture on site. The injection process itself is quite energy efficient in comparison to carbon capture processes. But nevertheless, like avoiding the use of energy sources that emit CO2 is always beneficial when it comes to the overall project's LCA. And from there on, we need an injector well, and this well is drilled to a certain depth. We normally target around 1,000 meters. And we look for specific zones where there are pre-existing fracture networks that we tap into. And we normally first initiate with just a water injection. And then from that water injection, we're able to track the plume. And from the tracking of the plume, we start building a reservoir model that couples geomechanics with geochemical reactions. And then we determine where to place a monitoring borehole or a recovery borehole. And that positioning is quite necessary, because once we start injecting CO2, we need to be able to establish geochemical monitoring to verify mineralization in the subsurface. In terms of our progress, we're a 5-year-old startup. We started in 2020. And so we started with a simple proof of concept project in our concession site in Alkhedhair in Oman. And that involved a series of small injections, but they were quite important. And we employed a specific method called push-pull testing, which we're basically injecting a known volume or a fixed volume of carbonated water into a specific zone in the subsurface. And then we leave it to incubate within a certain period of time. And once that incubation period passes, we pull the same fluid out, and we do before and after comparison, accounting for dispersion in the subsurface. So that project was quite successful, and it was the seed for our growth since then. And that's when we moved to the UAE, or we expanded into the UAE, where we delivered a demonstration scale project. And what I would say is quite a rapid time. It delivered in less than 9 months. We were targeting it to be showcased as part of COP28, which was a success. And then from there on, we scaled up yet again. And that scale up was part of the X Prize competition, where we partnered up with Air Capture, our direct air capture partner. And then, so they basically were hosted on site. They captured the CO2, and we dealt with the sequestration part of the project. And that was completed recently, and we have been awarded the X Factor Award as part of X Prize. From here on, we're focusing on developing into commercial stage, where we're focusing on building another scale up in the UAE, the same site, and another demonstration or commercial scale up in Oman. This is just a case study focused on the project we executed in the UAE. So as I mentioned before, it was quite rapidly deployed, and it started from the very basics of basically identifying a suitable site, engaging with the community, doing all the exploration activities, all the surveys necessary to identify where to drill the first well. And then once we identify or where we should drill the first well, we develop the sink. And then from sink development, we start working on developing the injection facility. That includes both carbon capture and injection, and the renewable energy infrastructure to power all of the setup. And once all of that is completed, it's an operational field where we have active monitoring, reporting, and verification program. So, what's special about mineralization, or what's the advantage in comparison to conventional storage? I always like to say that it's not in competition. It is about really how to minimize overall CCUS cost. So for different locations, I think different technologies will be more applicable. Locations that have access to conventional storage options normally do not really have access to mineralization options, and vice versa. So having more optionality when it comes to availability of sinks, I think is probably the most critical factor, because it reduces the transportation component quite massively and reduces the overall cost of sequestration, or the cost of the entire chain of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And some other points, just in comparison between conventional storage and mineralization, is ability to employ dedicated sinks. Typically, conventional storage requires quite extensive monitoring program because it necessitates presence of a cap rock, and how to identify that and how to monitor that there is no leakage through the cap rock. That requires quite a lot of monitoring. And to do that monitoring, or to make the entire scheme feasible, you need scale to disperse that cost. Monitoring for in-situ mineralization is much simplified because it's much lower risk. So we can do commercial injections at a much smaller scale. Another is modularity, which is linked to dedicated sinks. You can think about mineralization as having multiple smaller sinks in comparison to conventional storage, where there is a single centralized sink and then multiple carbon capture operations. And then reduced monitoring time. The conventional storage is you're storing the CO2 infinitely. It stays there in the subsurface for thousands of years. Where in mineralization, it's quite rapid. So it mineralizes over a short period of time. And then once you prove that mineralization took place, you can stop the monitoring activity. And then community acceptance. There is just better acceptance when it comes to green tech solutions in comparison to just solutions provided by legacy oil and gas operators. So mineralization is not just limited to the mountains of Oman, although we are quite lucky having such a massive ophiolite. It's quite abundant worldwide, especially when we account for both mafic and ultramafic rocks. And so that enables quite a large expansion potential for this technology. And we're specifically targeting Europe next, which is because of peridotite deposits that are available there. Not just peridotite, it's also basaltic deposits there, just in general mafic and ultramafic rock types. And there is better regulatory frameworks available, a better system to monetize on carbon credits. The EU ETS is there available. And then strong existing partnerships with some of our investors and availability of grant funds for future R&D operations. And lastly, we just closed recently our Series A funding grant. Series A is targeted for commercializing this technology, and it was led by Equinor and Shurok Ventures. And I think a total of 42 million were raised to meet this milestone. Yeah, that's my presentation. We'll be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Sulaiman, for sharing the impressive progress of your pilot scales in different regions on the Middle East, as well as the technical details about the in-situ mineralization. Interesting information, actually. And it's remarkable to see the periodized mineralization from moving from pilot to demonstration, as you mentioned. Also wish you luck on the 2026 target of your commercial projects. So regarding this question, I got two questions, one on the water use. So for the water needed to prepare the carbonated water, is it treated formation water from the same reservoir, or is it just normal water?
We're focused on basically using sustainable sources of water. So anything that goes into our process has to not compete with water that is used for alternate uses, especially in the region here where it's water stressed. So what we rely on is treated water and or seawater and recycled water from the formation we're targeting. So as long as that water is of quality that is suitable for injection, and it is not in competition with any other uses, we can use that water.
Okay, thank you. The second question is about reservoir conditions. So what are the typical reservoir conditions, pressure, temperature in Oman for achieving the mineralization? How you deal with the pressure buildup during the injection process?
Pressure buildup varies across reservoirs. So we see what the behavior in Oman is quite different than the behavior in the UAE. Similarly, in another project that we're just initiating in Europe, there's another different behavior. But initially, it's always tends to be hydrostatic when it comes to pressure. There is certain differences on where the free water level is, but that's just normal variances. Temperature tends to be just a normal geothermal temperature gradient, which just varies between locations.
Thank you very much, Sulaiman. So I've got more questions. If you kindly please answer them on the Q&A window. Now we will move to our last and next speaker, talking about also in situ mineralization. Nadir will be talking about their company, CO2 Lock Corp, where he will shed light on the use of porosite-rich ultramafic rocks for rapid permanent CO2 mineralization. The recent demonstration of in situ injection at scale in North America marks a major step forward. Dr. Nadir is a seasoned engineer leader with over 15 years of experience in climate technology, carbon management, operation, and project implementation. He has led pioneering initiatives in CCUS technology, operational strategy, and the deployment of advanced MRV systems. He also serves on the ISO Technical Committee for CCUS. His work bridges science, innovation, operation, and policy to enable a credible, affordable, and verifiable climate action. Dr. Nadir, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, and thank you very much, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to be here on this webinar. Nadir Mosavat, a PhD and professional engineer. I'm currently CTO of CO2 Lock Corporation, based in Vancouver, Canada. I have years of leadership experience in subsurface CCUS and climate technology. And as mentioned by Abdullah, I'm serving as a committee member for ISO CCUS standard. I'll start with some technical stuff associated with the CCUS and mineralization, and then I'll move into the measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification aspects of mineralization, and the case of CO2 Lock today. Just the overall understanding of what sort of technical assurance is required for different aspects of the CCUS value chain, starting from direct air capture, stability of the sorbents and different materials there, all the way to the transport assurance in terms of the pipeline optimization, material and integrity, all the way to storage assurance, which is very much relevant to the site-specific geological modeling, mineralization modeling, chemical modeling, geochemical modeling, and if there is any kind of integrity associated with the injection of the CO2 in terms of the reservoir integrity, sealing integrity, and the long-term injection well and monitoring wells integrity. All of these aspects are very relevant to various technical aspects and the operational aspects of any CCUS project operation. Moving to geological CO2 storage, here I like to highlight two main approaches available there. One is the mineralization approach, which is relatively shallow injection into various reactive rocks. It can be mafic and ultramafic rocks. And the focus of CO2 lock is there by providing safe, permanent, and affordable mineralization kind of technology, as compared to the conventional storage, which is the sedimentary formations like saline, aquifer, and depleted oil and gas. One aspect I like to highlight here is that the product of the CO2 mineralization and the mineralization product is a solid product. And when it is compared to the conventional CO2 storage, where the CO2 is either in a gas phase or supercritical phase, in terms of the CO2 mobility and the risk of the leakage is much less when it comes to the CO2 mineralization and in situ CO2 mineralization. Here I show a rock coming from our site in British Columbia, Canada, which clearly shows the kind of solid stored CO2 in the fractures of the brucite-rich serpentinized deposits at depth. Probably I don't need to go through this. This is the journey of the CO2 molecule being dissolved in water, then forming acid, injection into the reactive rocks. The reaction is happening and the product is various types of carbonates. Obviously, it can be magnesium, calcium carbonates, and it can be also a lot of different hydrocarbonates as well, as it was discussed during the MCI presentation. Obviously, the minerals are available within the rocks. It has to be dissolved and precipitate. Precipitation is also there. CO2 concentration is also very important, and CO2 dissociation is also very important. And obviously, the kinetics of the carbonate formations is also very critical during these aspects. One has to really look into these four elements and looking into what is exactly the rate limiting factor in terms of developing the technology, especially when it comes to in situ mineralization. All the in situ properties and the operating conditions becomes very important to understand which one is the limiting factor to really focus on in terms of developing technologies and optimizing and accelerating the process. Here's the location, central British Columbia, near the city called Prince George here in Canada, which is our flagship SAM project. Over 5,000 hectares of the land being acquired in terms of the mineral tenure and the CCS tenure. We are very close to the city and around 6 million tons of emission in that area. And our site capacity has a very large capacity, but we want to develop 25 years of 1 million ton per year project in that location. Electricity in British Columbia is one of the greenest electricity in the world by being more than 90% hydro and renewable sources. We have seen excellent brucite grade. Brucite is MgOH2, which is reacting very fast with CO2 in the lab within minutes or so. And we are expediting that or accelerating that reaction in situ. We have seen also through our various site characterization properties, a very excellent subsurface properties in terms of the natural fractures and the connectivity of the fractures. So here, I think we discussed that before over the course of various presentations here, but when we talk about the risk of the leakage and the risk of the CCUS, especially when it comes to the in situ processes, everything is associated with the CO2 mobility. If the CO2 is converted to a solid phase or mineral trap, the risk of the leakage is zero. And this will reduce the cost of the long-term monitoring, etc., especially around the storage security for the post-injection period, as well as the various types of the CO2 trapping mechanisms. So monitoring, measurement, reporting, and verification is also very important. And most of the companies, we have to really look into various aspects of the verification. We have to go through various processes, through different standards to generate a reliable and verified and validated carbon credit. And in the case of the in situ CO2 mineralization, obviously there are various aspects associated with the CO2 containment, site conformance, storage permanency, HSE, and also the reliability of the business model associated with that. There are a number of technical monitoring approaches that we can take, especially for the in situ CO2 mineralization and subsurface CO2 storage, especially around CO2 plume monitoring, cap rock integrity, if there is any cap rock associated with that, the wellbore monitoring, and also seismicity and near surface CO2 monitoring. Most projects have to deliver a reliable platform and protocol for MRV in order to get through the validation and verification process for the stored CO2. Our journey obviously started with the proof of concept back in 2021. Then we went through a range of exploration for borusite-rich deposits around the world. We found a very great serpentinized peridotite belt here in BC, Canada. And then we went through the site appraisal in terms of the injectivity testing and modeling, pressure testing of the deposits, and a lot of surface sampling and surface geophysical work. We reached to the development planning phase right now, where we are we have designed our pilot to be executed later this year and early next year for the monitoring part. Once the monitoring and verification is complete, we'll go through the scale-up process toward the late of next year, 2026. And obviously, we are ready to tap into the fully commercial operation in 2027. With this, I'd like to thank you all very much for the great presentations today, and also the great questions by the audience. And I would like to hand it over to Abdullah for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nader, for the great insights and also the progress updates of your company. Your work with borusite mineralization offers actually an exciting pathway for scalable and permanent CDR solutions. Also giving insight into MRV on in situ mineralization aspect of carbon mineralization. This is an important information. So regarding the question, the first question is about the regulatory and environmental consideration that you are navigating in Canada, and what is your take on CO2 mineralization permitting issue, especially you are operating a large-scale injection project?
Yeah, very good question, Abdullah. Obviously, there are lots of jurisdictions and locations around the world. They are currently developing CCS protocol, not only for mineralization, but for the overall geological CO2 storage. Countries and jurisdictions like various states in the US, they are kind of far advanced in that aspect. Here in Canada, British Columbia is also taking the CCS and CCUS very seriously in terms of developing the carbon registry, CCS licensing regime here in BC, and also Alberta. And we are very glad to work with different regulator for that. Obviously, in situ CO2 mineralization is kind of new to them. There are not lots of projects developing that. We are 4401 ourselves, Carfix, we are taking advantage of being a first mover in that kind of environment, but at the same time, we are working very closely with the regulator in terms of kind of sharing the knowledge in terms of how a project, in terms of the in situ mineralization, in terms of the operation is moving forward, what sort of injectivities we are dealing with, what sort of conformance we are looking at, and what sort of fate of CO2 in terms of the site boundary we are dealing with. So in that aspect, I see BC being a very good place in that aspect. Communication with the regulator and the stakeholders are great, but we have to also appreciate the fact that this is an evolving area, and more communication is needed within different stakeholders in this industry.
Thank you, Nader. And I believe your role on the ISO technical committee may be adding to improving the permitting process for the in-situ mineralization and enhanced mineralization in general. Another question I got is about what kind of monitoring techniques to confirm that mineralization has taken place in your project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Obviously, it's very important to really validate and verify the conversion of CO2 into the solid materials. When it comes to the ex situ processes, in terms of the surface processes, obviously you have the sample of the product, and you can take it through various sample analysis to analyze the carbon content, carbonate content, etc. Which can be pretty reliable. But when it comes to in situ, I think the challenge will be mainly around the access. So you don't have access to the mineralized CO2. Obviously, the most important aspect of verification can be kind of post-injection drilling and sampling and coring of the specific part of the deposit. But that may not be feasible in different locations due to the field kind of integrity. The main aspect that most mineralization companies, especially in-situ mineralization companies, are working with is using tracers and a very dedicated kind of reservoir modeling to really track the plume and also the use of the CO2. So use of tracers is the main aspects here.
Thank you very much, Nader, for your insightful presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our webinar. I want to sincerely thank each of you, our speakers, participants, for being part of this important global conservation on accelerating carbon dioxide removal through enhanced mineralization. Over the past 2 hours, we've gained valuable insights from across the spectrum, from ex-situ mineralization to enhanced weathering to in-situ CO2 storage. I want to thank each of our speakers for sharing their invaluable insight and real-world experience with enhanced mineralization technologies. Each speaker brought a unique perspective, rooted in real-world experience and the ambition to scale solutions that matter. Several key themes emerged today. The commercial reality. We have seen project moving from laboratory concept to commercial reality. We have seen projects scaling from pilot to industrial operation. Also, the diversity of approaches from enhanced weathering in agriculture to in-situ injection and geological formation demonstrate that enhanced mineralization can be adapted to different geological, economic, and social contexts globally. Also, the need for collaboration across public and private sector, across geographies, and across disciplines to unlock scalability, the shared sense of urgency and opportunity in deploying enhanced mineralization as a viable path toward net zero. While challenge remains, today's presentation showed that these challenges are being systematically addressed by a dedicated team around the world. Today's discussion are a testament to the global commitment to make enhanced mineralization not just a promising technology, but a deployable solution contributing meaningfully to climate goals. On behalf of the organizing team, the Mission Innovation, CDR, King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, Ministry of Energy of Saudi Arabia, and CSIRO in Australia, thank you once again for your participation and engagement. If you have any comments or speakers before we end this meeting. Okay, thank you all. We look forward to seeing you in future events. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. See you soon.